give good question and good comment to our panel session. So I will be introducing. I'll start by a round table just to introduce our panelists for today. So we have Niran van der Gest. I don't know if I pronounce it that way. Okay. She's a steering group. She's coming from a steering group member, a Dutch spark for clean cooking. We have also Matt Evans. He's a director of investment, environmental commodity partners. We have also Jasmine Saint. I got it well? Yeah, okay. He's director of Fair Climate Fund. We have also Matthias Olsson. He's a CEO of Emerging Cooking Solutions. And my name is Patrice Binois. I'm a business support expert from UNCDF. I work in Congo Kinshasa. So if there is some French people, some French-speaking people, bonjour. Ah, super. On n'est pas seul ici. Au moins, il y a un peu de français sur le stage. Okay. So, on va commencer avec notre discussion. Oh, we are going to start. Sorry, my French is native, so sorry. We are going to start with our discussion. I know that blockchain is a very lovely topic. Many people love blockchain, but I'm not sure that everybody knows what is going on, what is really blockchain. So I'm going to start with Matt, with a quick question. What is blockchain?
Can everyone hear me? Well, so I'll respond to that question first by saying I'm not a blockchain expert, so we'll start there. I'm an investor with Environmental Commodity Partners and also have been supportive of a couple of project developers. Can you guys hear me okay? There we go, perfect.
There is some...
Sorry for the lean over here. I'll just start by saying I'm not a blockchain expert. I'm an investor with Environmental Commodity Partners. We invest in all different types of carbon projects around the world, including cook stove projects and other similar project types. So that's kind of what I'm representing here. I've also been involved in the launch of a couple of developers of carbon offset projects, including cook stove developers, and was a very small part of the production of the first gold standard methodology. So I'm somewhat aware of you know. Is this better? Yes. So I'm somewhat aware of how a lot of the monitoring happens now. Very quickly, and I think Jasmeet is probably a better place to explain blockchain to us, but the basic concept is a decentralized registry or source of truth, right? So it's rather than a centralized, like a carbon standard or a bank, for example, ledger of what's happening, who has what, etc. It's decentralized, and it does not require trust in a central system, because you have computers around the world or around wherever that are basically operating according to a set of rules that theoretically holds a source of truth that everyone can agree to and believe in. Maybe I'll pause there and let a smarter man take over.
Okay. Yes?
Shall I add?
Add, yes, of course.
So, to keep it brief, the blockchain is the blocks with data, which is encrypted, which cannot be which is encrypted, which is immutable, and it is not owned by anybody. So, if we are talking about any kind of data, in this context, it's the carbon credits. So, it is not owned by Gold Standard, it is not owned by any one project developer, it is not owned by any certification agencies, or any private sector organizations. So that is how the blockchain used in the carbon markets looks like. So any data which is immutable and it's trustworthy and nobody is owning it, it's the collective ecosystem who is building that data space, and then we are making the transactions. transactions can be financial and non-financial both. When it's non-financial, it's carbon credits. When it's financials, then all banking systems are following the same.
So thank you for that introduction. My question is, what type of application does the blockchain can be useful for? I come back to, but yes?
Well, so I think blockchain has led to some very interesting applications in other spaces, right? So you've probably heard of the concept of NFTs. Maybe we shouldn't be allowed to say an acronym without introducing it. But it's basically a digital thing where if it's transacted later, it can be transacted according to a certain set of rules. And fundamentally, the way it's been used in art, which is really interesting, is that rather than a situation now where artists, for example, sell a piece of work and that's it, if it's digital art, it can be sold, and then when it's resold between parties later, automatically some value can go back to the artist. So that's kind of an interesting example of how a blockchain system is being applied to provide some value.
So blockchain have been pushed like to replace money in some countries, even in some application. But now we are talking about cook stove, about clean cooking. What is the place of blockchain in our context? Yes, yes, okay, yeah.
Maybe I zoom out a little bit. My name is Nera van der Geest. I represent the Dutch Park for Clean Cooking Solutions. And actually the Dutch Park is a group of Dutch partners, being government, financial institutions, cookstove providers, local NGOs, and also carbon developers. And actually the blockchain is some sort of, it's a group that is also seeking innovation. And why do we seek innovation? To get as much of the cleanest cook stoves to the lowest income people. And that is our mission and vision that we support. And the government of the Netherlands is also part of this Spark group. And so we were sort of thinking about innovations, what could bring the best of the carbon markets to the end users and to the beneficiaries. So this is one, and Jasmeet will elaborate on it. It is a partnership where you find innovation, and that is something that I feel needs to be highlighted, that working together with different types of groups can speed up things. And blockchain is not an end in itself, but it could be a way to channel funding, for example, from carbon markets to end users. We spoke about end user finance in the previous session. It could be like a subsidy of the end users, and you could also use it for other things. So the Dutch Park is sort of, and that's what I want to highlight, a sort of inspiring collaboration. And while we are all here at this forum, there are many competitors, but I think we also can sharpen the saw while talking to each other in different settings, so with governments, with financiers. So we all try to raise the bar in this Dutch Spark. So we have one, it's also a community of practice with pellets, partners in pellets. And there is one way to use blockchain to get as much rollout of stoves as possible. Because I think if you look at the world, we need more stoves in every household, also from the climate perspective. So it's a bit zooming out, and now I zoom in again to the practical project that we're doing, because talking is good, but doing is better.
Yes, thank you, thank you. So before I get to Matt, I have two Matt on stage, sorry, Matt and Matthias, so somehow it'll be confusing. But blockchain came into discussion because companies that want to sell their right on carbon market, they have been delayed. Like it takes long time to get certified because there have to be someone to certify that what you are declaring is clear and it is okay. But the other side, the buyers are also complaining and they want to be trusted. They want to make sure that what they are about to buy is validated. And that is when I can say blockchain comes in, because it can give a technology that is trusted, that is speed. So I think that can be a starting point. But that is not my point of view, or let's say it's just a thought. I know that in the public also you have your point of view, and our colleague also we have their point of view, and I think I would like to have some discussion about that one. So as we are going forward, I don't know if you would like to plus something about that?
Yeah. No, I think it's... hello?
The second one?
Well, it's good you bring that up because I think blockchain can solve many problems in this space, in the carbon credit space, because there are a handful of problems. So one is that it takes a very long time for the project developer to get paid. It could easily be a 2-year, and it's also, you need to be a fairly large developer to go through all the programs and everything. So the time is a big one, and the lack of transparency is another one, because there is almost quite an opaque market. You don't know who is paying what for what. You don't know where the carbon credit money really goes, how much goes back to the originator of the carbon credit, which is a user. It's the user switching, for example, from a dirty fuel to a cleaner, and so on. So there are different problems that the blockchain can solve. And why can it solve these problems? It's because of some of its inherent qualities. One being immutable, that you cannot go and change a blockchain. Blocks are stacked on each other, and you cannot go and take another block and change that. It's forever. And you can't even turn off the server and say they are gone, because the decentralized nature that Matt was talking about, the blockchains is a network of connected computers that they have figured out the way how to reach consensus that the transaction is valid. So this is why I think the potential is that it could also reach this scale of carbon credits that have been talked about. We need to 10x everything at least to really reach impact.
Thank you. So it's now becoming somehow clear, even to my view. I don't know about you, but we have some questions. But before we have we have some questions, so I come back to Nera. You introduced what you do already with the Dutch, but what does the Dutch Pact for Clean Cooking support innovation? Like directly.
Maybe I elaborate a bit on I explained the Dutch Park, the composition and the aim, and it's indeed built to accelerate and to also support the objectives of the Dutch government to bring clean energy to 100 million people worldwide. And we're going to, first step is in Rwanda, where we want to support a platform in which the households get a payment based on the carbon income that will be generated. So we have cook stoves. The Mimimoto stoves will be sold to households. The households will cook on the cook stove, and once the carbon income is coming, there will be a cashback system to also support the purchase of the cook stoves. This is in order to lower the gap, the ability to pay gap. There will be also phases in payment systems so that you can pay off your stove in longer periods, up to 2 years. And actually what we also want to do is with this platform, with blockchain information, we want to validate the platform and also get the pallet sales reduced because of the carbon income that is needs to flow to the households. So that type of innovation, and we build that with different partners of the Dutch Park. So we are a community of practice, and we're really trying to get this working.
Thank you. So now get back to Jasmine's side. I'm quoted well? Jasmine's side? Okay. So, what could be possible with the blockchain in monitoring, reporting, and certification, like validation?
Sure. So we are in the clean cooking forum, so I take the example of cook stoves. And we heard from yesterday and today also X millions cook stoves has been distributed. So when we are saying cook stove distributed, it doesn't mean the impact has been created. And project developers makes the claims that sometimes it's right, overestimated, underestimated. So what exactly the blockchains can play a role in that direction. So if I compare very quickly the monitoring, reporting and verification system in the conventional way and what we are expecting from the blockchains to do. Starting from the data collection at the household level where the cook stoves has been deployed. In a conventional way, we are doing it with a paper and pen, and in a blockchain or a digital MRV systems, we are expecting some role of sensors, some role of geosatellite imageries, and some inputs that it is coming connected to the household's devices. Second level is what we are doing in a data storage. So data storage is happening right now in Excel files. The certification agencies, auditors ask that submit these emission reductions, how it has been made. But when we go to the digital MRV systems, it is going to be stored in a cloud and a digitalized ledger technology, which is immutable, which is already explained right by Matt. Third, we go with the algorithms. When we done the algorithms, there is a prone to human errors. But when we run a program in a digital MRVs, we don't need to look for that. And on a real-time basis, we can measure that each household, how much is contributing into a project which is generating millions of credits. Last but not the least is the verification. The auditors plan the visit 2 months in advance and then conduct, and the certification agencies based in Europe and US take those credibility on the face value that this has done the good job. But the actual is, in a digital MRVs, we just need to share the APIs. And in a real-time manner, the household doesn't need to wait for the financing for 2 years. It can be done monthly basis, weekly basis. It can identify good users, bad users. So all these things are happening because of the blockchain. And the way our organization, Fair Climate Fund, is adding, it's not only limited to the data part, that we are talking about data. It eventually boils down to the revenues. That how the carbon revenues are being distributed from the end buyers to the impact creators who are happening in the global south and the impact buyers happening in the Western countries. So how they are able to interact, and this can only be possible in this means of sources. The blockchain seems to be like a potential solution which can address maximum answers, which right now the carbon markets are facing.
Yes, it's interesting when it is said, but I think it can also raise some other questions, like some other issues. The session before our session was talking about subsidy or something like that. And people are already complaining about the price of stove and appliance. I think there should be some implication with all those devices inserted in stove. How do you address this one? Yes, Matt?
So how do you address the question of?
My question is, I'm somehow afraid about the price to make all those things going on. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it raises an interesting question, right? If you're ultimately relying on future carbon revenues to come in to reimburse the people using the stoves, ultimately they're probably taking some risk, some what we would call merchant risk on the carbon markets, and maybe you'd want to manage that or mitigate it. But I guess the thing that I would also want to add is that I would be careful about anything in the carbon space that basically claims what I would call the myth of objectivity, right? Fundamentally, everything that's generating avoided emissions credits is based on a hypothetical. And so you see some really kind of exciting digital MRV methodologies, specifically concerning metered devices in the cook stove space, that from some perspectives are actually worse at estimating the actual carbon savings that's happening. And the reason for that is because
the original kitchen performance test was designed to factor in a lot of things, and on the other side of the house, you had a lot of the CDM carbon methodologies that were really just applying emissions factors to baselines that were monitored. And so the new digital MRV is actually taking that latter, technically less accurate approach, but it's probably better on usage. So like one quick just like flag to raise is that any claim of like this is going to make the whole thing transparent, this is going to be like, don't trust it.
So maybe that can get me back to Jasmine and ask how Fair Climate Fund is leveraging blockchain in India.
So Fair Climate Fund is working on a digital MRV platform, which is backed with the fundamentals of blockchain. And we have already piloted one project in India and now going to replicate the second one in Rwanda. We are basically, in India, we have put up the sensors along with the cook stoves, which is giving on a real-time basis whether the cook stove is being used or not. And it's an eye-opener, and I don't shy away with sharing the results, that in if you find out any cook stove project which has been implemented, 80 to 90% of utilization claiming in any certification standard is normal. But what we have seen after, we are talking about only 100 households which we can monitor personally. But if we capture these data, in 6 months, it's 65% is the utilization rate. So that is the level of accuracy is coming out of it. And we are like, with this platform, looking forward an answer to the market. Level of accuracy is also discouraging for a project developer on the carbon credits. What is the incentive for a project developer to switch to a DMRV, because it is giving less credits to them. So whether there is an accuracy premium we can expect in the market, the buyers who expect higher transparency, high rate of good quality carbon credits, it's come with a premium. Premium can go 2 times, 2x, 3x, but that is what we are doing. And we didn't conclude here that only capturing the data and these households are having the X amount of emission savings. On the same platform, blockchain is known for financial transactions, not for capturing right now the carbon credits, it's the innovation. So in the same platform, we are transacting, the buyers can purchase the credits, and the households who are contributing how much kgs of carbon saving on daily basis will get their fair share on their bank accounts.
Thank you. So turning back now to Matthias. The question is, how is your company emerging cook stove solution using blockchain today? So you can just introduce a little bit about your company and then you answer the question.
Yeah, so we work across 3 countries, Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, and we have worked for a long time with fuel switch cooking. We're using pellets and the Mimimoto stoves. We've developed an IoT, Internet of Things solution for the Mimimoto stoves. So the stoves are connected to internet, and all our stoves now sold are connected to internet. So we have about 2,000 stoves connected. We have a lot of data for the past year and a half. I think we have more than 25 million records now of data. And we know exactly which customer is buying pellets, exactly how much, when they cook, what time, and so on. And the question is, why do we need all this data? So we need it for our own management of customers, because if they're buying our pellets and we generate carbon credits, it's good. If they use the stove as a flower pot, everyone loses out. There's zero impact. But I've been very interested in and very engaged in blockchain for many years, many different blockchains. About a year ago, I started the journey of bringing this data to the blockchain. And now I'm very happy to show to any one of you afterwards. We have something up on testnet now. In a month it will go live. So we have 1,500 stoves connected to blockchain. We've created digital twins, as we call it. So the stove is in the kitchen being used, and on chain, as it's called, we have a digital twin, an NFT, where all this data is connected. So fuel purchase, running time, and everything is basically immutable. And what the vision for this is really, like I mentioned, that project developers and not just big developers, but also small distributors, maybe even selling just 10 stoves, eventually could benefit from carbon in a way that is completely transparent. And the hope is that there will be buyers on the other end, and that's an assumption. Everyone now wants the stamp or gold standard, and Vera and so on. But the hope is that there will be buyers who are willing to pay a premium, because we're only claiming the actual usage. In our case, it's about 75% in Malawi and 65% usage in Zambia, and in Mozambique it's a bit less. But we're very happy with those numbers. It will give us about 4 carbon credits.
Thank you very much. So we are doing amazing work in many, you say 3 countries in Africa? Yes, that's amazing. So, Matt Evans, what is your point of view about the blockchain in cooking stuff? Your point of view?
About the blockchain broadly in cookstove
yes.
climate finance?
Yes.
I mean, I think that some of those opportunities to sort of document more transparently financial flows associated with projects could be done in a centralized registry or a decentralized registry, but I think there's a lot of benefit to sort of starting to think in those contexts. The one kind of concept that I would bring up that I think is really relevant to this, and if you were in the carbon event on Monday, you heard me say this too, but broadly in the carbon markets right now, cook stoves are not winning in voluntary markets. There's a significant premium to nature-based red credits, for example, and there's a lot driving that, but underlying it, there's a focus and from my perspective, fundamentally, a lack of comfort with using social science methods to quantify carbon savings. And I think that some of the reliance on technology, like to kind of fill in, or the implication that it can fill in and make cookstove carbon credits perfect or even significantly better, I think there is a lot of opportunity for that, but we can't fool ourselves that we have to move, that we're going to completely move away from social science methods, because ultimately the baselines will require them, and so we need to be really careful about beating up on social science methods as we think about, how we use digitization to improve MRV in this space.
Okay, thank you. So now, turning this side to get some questions and comments from the public. I've seen already, maybe you can use this one.
Hi, Matthias. You said, I understand, let me rephrase what you said. So, digitization, blockchain, Internet of Things, connectivity, all of the above will replace the verification process, which is cumbersome, expensive, and not very scalable, right? That's why I understand what this is about. You said 2,000 stoves you have now been monitored. 2,000 stoves, is that scalable? Do you need to do 100,000 stoves to make dent, or is 2,000 stoves out of, I don't know, 200,000, and your 2,000s are like, is a sampling exercise, or is it that every single stove that you will ever claim carbon credits needs to have the sensor and the SIM card and the connectivity issues and all those things? I'm slightly confused with the size of the exercise.
Yes,
Okay.
I think the main thing is that you need to have a very strong, a very solid data. If you are going to make these claims, there has to be a solid data. And actually, one of the best data is actually proof of selling the fuel. It's like you don't even have to connect stoves to internet. We do it because it gives us a lot of knowledge. But if you can prove that you sold the fuel, and this is also what the gold standard methodology for metered devices is based on, you prove that you sold the fuel. So I would say a solid program does not have to have stoves connected to internet, but you have to have electronic transaction records of the fuel sale. It adds costs, all these things. But there are a number of, all the modern cooking, the 5 or so modern fuels, they all sell fuel or sell power. So there's no reason why modern cooking couldn't seamlessly fit into this thing. But I should also say that blockchain is just a technology. It's basically a database where you can also use something called smart contracts, which gives it a really incredible power. And it's very low cost in terms of the transaction cost. But you still need a baseline, a very solid baseline. You need a solid methodology. You need a claim, and you need a verification of the claim. And then you tokenize it in the registries. Instead, you have a serial number. But the difference when you tokenize it, and if you have this underlying data, is that, for example, what I mentioned, we can unpack every carbon credit into its constituents data. So you could say that this carbon token consists of these underlying claims, which you can't do on a registry. It's based on random verification. So qualitatively, there should be a price differentiation. And my bet, this is why we're doing this, it's not to reduce the amount of carbon credits. It's betting on a price differentiation in the future, that a high quality carbon credit, which will be less, you're basically saying we're getting less credits. There should be in the best of worlds, there should be a price differentiation.
Okay, I can see some question rising from this side. We take this one first, and then we come back.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Josh Ducci, and I'm with Hatter Foundation. So it's quite interesting listening to the conversation around carbon credits. So what are the implications of blockchain in countries' commitments to the provisions under Article 3 of the Paris Agreement?
And your question is for who? For all of them?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Who is?
I think it was about Article 6, right? About how it... What's that?
What is the implication of blockchain in countries' commitments under the provisions that Article 3 gives of the Paris Agreement?
Well, just my idea is that it's blockchain. All carbon accounting should be on blockchain. And blockchain, there are many blockchains, but they interrelate and they talk because it's basically systems that are really transparent. So if there is a claim here and another one there, if it's on blockchain, it can be done very, very accurately. And the risk otherwise, if you have silos of databases, the risk is that there are double counting, things are not properly accounted for, but everything on blockchain is immutable. It won't change over time. So you can much easier get an overview of how everyone is accounting for this.
Yes, that makes me have a question for Nira. For this blockchain to be effective, this microphone is... Maybe I should try this. So for this blockchain to be effective, should all the country adopt it, or some players can start before the other?
I agree with Matthias. It should be, all over the place. We spoke earlier in this forum about other indicators that you could measure. I'm very worried about overclaiming in the carbon world. There's a lot of overclaiming going on. Baselines may not be that well defined, but if you go to digitization and measuring, it's a better quality than if you do it manually and you really measure the cooking time, for example. But the point I want to make is that also you can have other impacts measured. I mean, cooking time and cooking time reduction for women, for example, can also be a basis for an SDG 5 quantification. So it not only brings in the carbon measurements and measurements instead of assessments or interview-based data, but it also gives a basis for other impacts. And I think that is a sort of basis that blockchain will bring. And the scaling, your question about scaling, I think this works to scale. I mean, it enables scaling. Because if you do all the things manually and you do it with an assessment that doesn't really reflect the actual practice, you get overclaims, you may be accused of greenwashing or things like that. You need to have data to prove your point. And scaling, if you have the good system, the good platform in place, you have low-cost sensors, because that's an issue. The sensors might be too expensive. So if you have a large scale, the sensor cost will come down. And I think it's also good to not make it too complex, just to have a very simple sensors, a lot of innovation going in that area, so that you really can measure only the things you need to have to do the claims. But it will support claiming to a high extent, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Can I build on this encouraging story from the capital? I am very excited about the potential for blockchain, although I also have to share Matt's cynicism a little bit, because this is very much at the moment a dream. Look, I know, Matthias, your dream is coming true, but it's very early stage, very early on, and it's not certainly the Holy Grail. I think it's right now really proving itself in the MRV side and really building trust in getting the data on the blockchain. What my question is, how far are we from actually increasing demand in these carbon credits? We should talk about it more in the term of the social value credits that we discussed earlier, include your other impacts as well. Is there a driver here? Anyone?
You're actually worried about the demand, huh? That you don't generate more demand if you use a blockchain. That's true. No, and I think, but even if the future is on NDCs and on carbon accounting for countries itself, it will also make it more accurate, the data. And I think we need a lot of carbon reductions, quantifications for the future to get to the Paris Agreement objectives anyways. And whether you trade them or you measure them and count them as an impact and be sure about the basis of the quantification, I think that doesn't make sense. I mean, you won't drive demand by using blockchain. It's not a goal, it's a means to get better data.
Thank you. Yes, okay.
Yeah, hi guys. An interesting one for me is around what that future could look like around carbon credits and integration of blockchain. Because I think on one level, you could look at it like equivalent to, say, a cryptocurrency where it's sort of very open trade, open market, but it potentially has a lot of aspects similar to a bond market where you have different grades of carbon credits through there, and then there's a role for someone to play around grading those carbon credits through that process as well. So I see it could potentially end up in a couple of different ways into the future. So I'd be interested to know from, I'm not sure which panelists, but what do you see as that ultimate outcome around how it could look in the future from a very sort of open, distributed solution to transacting carbon credits between different parts of the world?
I think Jasmeet, you can get to
Sure. So I can say what we can expect from the market right now. Everybody is talking about high quality carbon credits and nobody is coming with the definition of high quality. There is no disagreement on the technical requirements of the high quality carbon credits like additionality, environmental integrity. But what we expect this kind of blockchain ecosystems will going to derive is one definitely is a transparent disclosures between the buyers and the consumers, that who is, for example, any X company is offsetting, that is very right now in a gray area they disclose in their annual reports. So bringing the blockchain, it makes quite simple that who is making the disclosures for what projects. And for example, I'm just taking example of a RED Plus projects that some XYZ company has offset in 2012 for those forest which has been burned. So how to track those transactions? If it is getting immutable data on the blockchain, this can be easily be tracked, monitored, discounted. And the second is how the countries are going to interact with each other on the registry side. So this blockchain definitely build the capacity of the local governments all across, I think, the world, that how they will going to integrate their registry accounting systems with others. So these are the two options I immediately see that this evolvement of the blockchain definitely address.
So, Matt, you can add something?
Yeah, I think we're in a room where we're talking about carbon and blockchain. It's really interesting. You have the Cookstove application, and then maybe just a little bit of context in terms of what's happening in the carbon world in blockchain. Both registries are, and I know there are people, at least from Gold Standard here, but both registries are really trying to figure out how the centralized registries that they manage could interact with blockchain in the future. And one of the big kind of really interesting problems that they have is the question of claiming, right? So if a carbon credit is retired, then the environmental benefit of that credit has been used. And a bunch of blockchains took off really early on that were basically buying credits on these registries, retiring them, using them, and then selling them out to any old person, right? And people were buying these tokens that represented a ton of reduced emissions. And the reality is that nobody really knew what they were doing. People were feeling good about owning that, that token, even if they then resold it, which means that they didn't actually drive any of the benefit that ultimately was happening underneath those programs. Additional issue is that those blockchains were buying bad carbon credits. So blockchain has a pretty dirty name, I would say, in the carbon space right now. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but certainly that's a bit of context here. And then as we zoom in, the other thing that I would add is that, in Cookstoves, I think we have to be, and broadly, once we get below the carbon registries, right? So this is within the verification process of a project, and then the issuance processes of projects. Some of the things that have been set up here are sort of assuming that you could use a blockchain kind of extra the carbon registry. There would be some other source of truth outside the carbon registry. And I think that's, and the people from Gold Standard could speak to this better than I, but that's a very hard, something should be done. We should have more transparency within what Gold Standard is running, but it becomes very awkward if we're saying we're just going to rely on the blockchain, because as we know, in Cookstoves, social science is required. And tech bros who buy tokens tend not to be social scientists. So you can't just rely on blockchain.
Thank you. There's still another question, maybe the last one, because we are running out of the time. Yes?
Hi, I'm Govind Agrawal from Anaxi Digital Runners. Tech for Climate is what I'm trying to pitch right now. My question is for Matthias. You mentioned double accounting, which can be avoided through blockchain. But what will be the unique ID to identify maybe a Cookstove project happening at a household level? So it's once the data is on blockchain, then it is maybe safe or unique or can be, but the data which is being created, it's actually digitized by a human being. So what will be the unique ID? It would be like a GPS of a household, because household is also a family, and family could be like a couple of people living in a house. So what will be the base element which will be unique so that, actually double accounting does not happen?
Yeah, great question. And maybe just to contextualize how early we are, because, blockchain, it's also in the Web3 space. Web 1 was static homepage, read. Web 2 was when Facebook and e-commerce came, read and write. And Web 3 is read, write, own. So the equivalent would be that you own the data now. So Web 3 is a really, really big thing. I would argue it's a bigger thing than Web 2, actually. And we're at the very early stage. If you remember when you talked about homepage, what is a homepage? This is where we're at with Web 3. So how we're doing it there, but how we are doing it is that, first of all, we have a digital certificate of the stove. So we take all the attributes of the stove, serial number, color, model, year of manufacture, all of those things. It's signed and put up as a digital certificate, and it's linked to the NFT. And then, so that's linking the stove. And then every transaction of buying the fuel, that is the underlying claim, which is then verified and then tokenized. So the transaction ID is a third-party transaction. It's a mobile money transaction. And to fake it, it would have to be faked by the mobile money, and it's actually money moving. So it's a very, very difficult thing to fake. So it's basically a combination of the signed, ID of the stove, and then a basically unique transaction ID of money that was purchased for the fuel. And then, of course, there are other assumptions which applies to all programs, that the fuel was used for the stove and so on. But this gives you a sense of how we thought it out, and there might be better ways, but this is how we're doing it now.
Thank you very much. We still have 5 minutes?
Please, everyone. We actually don't. We've got someone who's wrapping up the day, which I forgot to brief you on, so my apologies for that, Patrice.
Okay.
But please, if everyone could just join me in thanking our brilliant moderator, our excellent panel, for a really engaging session on blockchain. And we're about to see something of Dutch efficiency here. In 5 minutes, we have Marcel Raats from RVO to wrap up all of the sessions that happened in this room today. Marcel, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Kip, and good afternoon, everybody. As Kip said, I'm Marcel Raats, work for RVO, an implementing agency for the Dutch government. Within RVO, I lead the energy and climate team, which is involved in energy access. So we are partnering with GIZ on the Energizing Development Program. We're working on domestic biogas. We're working on higher tier cook stoves with co-funding from the EU and from the Danish government. And we also have our own RBF facility, the SDG 7 results facility. And we are integrating within the team of today in most of our operations currently RBF, be it on the global, be it on the national level. I was asked to reflect a little bit on what I've heard today during the panels, and I must say I have a feeling now like we're ready for takeoff. At the same time, I also know that we're still a little bit on quicksand, and we still need to break a couple of chains before we really can take off. Listening to the various panels today, I see that there was a lot of business model innovation in the last year. Bringing down unit costs, coming up with innovations, bringing into scale into a number of companies in the sector, and at the same time, if I look a little bit to the sector, I see that this growth, this scaling up, is being done by not that many companies as I would like to see. So the challenge that we have, all of us, is how do we really bring the lessons and the learnings of these new business models of these companies that are really moving forward, how do we bring that to the rest of the sector, and to the others in the sector, and who are these others? As from RVO, as a representative also of the Dutch government, we're also particularly interested in what is going on and what is happening with local SMEs. How do we prevent, as was said earlier today, in the solar sector, that there are a few bigger companies that are leading and marching forward the sector, and that local companies in many of the countries are either being pushed out or are not giving the chances that they need in order to grow themselves and to make the sector as a whole a success. Because the challenge is not 100 million people like we have in the Netherlands, it's billions of people. So we need more traction and we need more companies in the sector. So what can we do about that? And there are two distinct pathways which we can do both. One is bring down costs further. And for that, I think we had a really interesting discussion on blockchain and what blockchain might bring to us in the future. So I hope that all your dreams come true. That will help us to make our dreams come true as well. But it's also what I heard, it's also in the enabling environment. It's discussing with national governments on taxes. It's national governments taking responsibility for clean cooking as a public good. There are also some innovative ideas going around on can we not bundle our procurement in a time where we see that costs of supplies and of materials are going up. The other topic, the hot topic of the day is on carbon. and on non-carbon additional funding and revenue streams. And I think when it comes to carbon, the thing that sprung to mind which I noticed was a remark that in the old days, and the old days are just a couple of years back, we had many projects and we had insufficient funds. And now all of a sudden we seem to have so many funds, but only a few projects. I think there's the challenge for us here in the room and also in the other rooms. How can we connect that in the coming years and preferably as soon as possible? It's also about monetizing the co-benefits, I think we used to call them, but monetize the impacts on health, on gender, on poverty, and for that we had Claudia Dutz coming up with really interesting information on the pilot that they are running on how do we monetize the gender benefits, how do we monetize the health benefits. Jan Kloijn, who was first a firm adversary of RBF subsidies, I think I have to talk to him in his evaluation this year. But at the end, Jan is also responsible with RVO, because we're doing it together with GIZ and with the World Bank and with other partners, for this end-user subsidy pilot that we are going to do in 4 or 5 countries with funding from the Dutch government, which I really find interesting because on one hand we are reaching out to the very poor, the ones that are, let's say, operating or living outside of the market that we're all targeting. And on the other hand, it's also an endeavor or an exercise where we include future funding for scale-up through World Bank funding from the design, the original phase, from the design in our operations, which hopefully makes scaling up later on a much easier task. So things are really, really moving forward. And at the same time, I also see that there's still a lot of challenges that we need to solve and a lot of puzzles that we need to make. So when it comes to carbon, there's a lot of promises, and we see that there are a lot of carbon projects already ongoing, and the carbon money is going further than that. We see that co-benefits are being monetized. We see that traditional, meanwhile, traditional RBS from donor funding are going into the sector. And at some point, these interact. And it's the interaction that we need to discuss about. There's a session tomorrow where we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that. But on one hand, it's how do we avoid market distortion? On the other hand, how do we make sure that the benefits at the end come to the right place in the value chain at the right time? And that is not an easy discussion, but it is one that we really have to dig into. I also heard this morning, and I touched upon it early on in my reflections, is where are the local SMEs in this whole discussions? How can we make sure that they're already part of the sector? How can we strengthen their position in the sector, either as an independent market player, or maybe to connect them up with the more high quality solutions that are out there in the market as a distributor of those companies. There was a discussion, it's a recurring discussion on ticket size, and we haven't been able to crack that problem yet. What we're doing from RVO is now we're working with 2 impact investors, or with two crowdfunders, where we take a part of their extra transaction costs, so they will engage with local SMEs in the clean cook stove sector. Not in order to scale it up immediately, because it's still a very hard ticket, and also our donors are a little bit reluctant to pay all the transaction costs, but to learn from and to see how can we bring in other actors in the sector and bring the financing on a level that is needed in the countries that we operate. And finally, I also would like to re-emphasize the discussion that was held earlier today also on, we see that the market is taking off in a number of countries. But there are also quite a number of countries where the market is not yet taking off. And I think it's our responsibility as a sector, it's also my responsibility as a donor or an implementing organization to also concern about that and to seek solutions for that. But I do want to finish on a high note, and that is what I took from really early on today from Acumen. And there was a quote, "Cook stoves have been an unbelievable investment for Acumen." So next time when I hope to be here, or in another place where you will have the forum, Faisal, I hope that we will hear from many more investors that same quote, that at the end of the day, cook stoves has become an unbelievable investment. So thank you very much. And I think I used all my time.
Thank you. So thank you very much. So I have to thank you also, our amazing public, because you have been there for us, and we have raised good questions, and we have participated in the debate. I feel that there is a need to continue discussing about this topic. I think that this will be a starting point, and will not be the last one. I really thank my fellow panelists who have been very, let's say, high level in the way they address the question, even the way you have participated. So thank you to everybody. Merci beaucoup à tout le monde. Merci beaucoup, surtout aux francophones qui sont restés là-bas. Je sais que c'est pas facile, mais au moins tout le monde a tenu bon jusqu'à la fin. Donc, ouais, on peut.